The sound of laughter cut deeper than any wrench slipping from his grip ever could. It wasn't loud, but it lingered, sharp, dismissive, the kind that made a man question his worth even when he knew better. Armin Qureshi stood beneath the harsh afternoon sun. Grease streaked across his forearms, his worn shirt clinging to his back as Karachi's heat pressed down like a judgment. He didn't look up when the expensive black SUV rolled past slowly, its tinted window lowering just enough for a well-dressed woman to glance at him with thinly veiled contempt before driving on. But he felt it, the silent verdict. Just a mechanic, just a single father, just someone the world had already decided wasn't worth much. If you believe kindness still matters in a world that often forgets it, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. Because sometimes the smallest acts can change lives in ways we never expect. Armin wiped his hands on a rag that had long ago surrendered any hope of being clean. His garage wasn't much. Just a rusted tin roof, a cracked concrete floor, and tools that had seen better days. But it was honest. It was everything he had built after life had taken almost everything else. The faint echo of his daughter's laughter from earlier that morning lingered in his mind, a fragile warmth he carried through long, exhausting days. Zoya was 10, far too wise for her age, and the only reason he kept pushing forward when the world seemed determined to push him back. People didn't know his story. They didn't see the nights he stayed awake worrying about school fees, or the mornings he skipped meals so Zoya wouldn't have to. They didn't see the man who once had dreams beyond this garage, beyond survival. All they saw was grease-stained hands and a tired face. The afternoon dragged on, the sun refusing to relent. Armin had just finished tightening the last bolt on a battered motorcycle when he heard it, a soft, panicked sob carried by the wind. It was out of place, fragile against the constant hum of engines and distant traffic. He looked up instinctively, scanning the road until his eyes landed on a girl standing beside a sleek white car, its tire completely flat. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes crisp and expensive, but her composure was unraveling fast. She kept glancing at her phone, pacing in small circles, her breathing uneven. Cars passed by without slowing. No one stopped. Armin hesitated. He had learned not to interfere where he wasn't wanted. People like her didn't trust men like him. They assumed the worst, saw danger where there was none, and yet something about the way her shoulders trembled tugged at him. It reminded him of Zoya on the day she lost her mother, the way fear had swallowed her whole. He set down his tools and walked toward her, slow enough not to startle her, but steady enough to show he meant no harm. The closer he got, the more her panic seemed to intensify. Her eyes darted toward him, wide and uncertain. He stopped a few steps away, keeping a respectful distance, and gestured toward the flat tire. His movements were calm, deliberate, the kind that spoke louder than words ever could. She hesitated, then nodded slightly, as if she didn't have many other options. Armin crouched beside the tire, his fingers moving with practiced ease. He didn't rush, didn't make her feel like she owed him anything. The jack clicked into place, the car lifting slowly as he loosened the bolts. The sun beat down relentlessly, sweat dripping from his forehead, but he didn't stop. Behind him, he could feel her watching, her breathing gradually steadying. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was healing in its own quiet way. Within minutes, the spare tire was secured, and Armin tightened the last bolt with a firm twist. He stood up, wiping his hands again, and stepped back. She looked at the repaired tire, then at him, as if trying to understand what had just happened. Gratitude flickered across her face, mixed with something deeper, relief, maybe even a little shame for having been afraid. She reached into her bag, pulling out what looked like money, but Armin shook his head gently. He didn't do it for that. He never did. With a small nod, he turned and walked back to his garage, leaving her standing there, watching him go. He didn't think much of it afterward. To him, it was just another moment, another small act of decency in a life filled with quiet struggles. He returned to his work, the rhythm of tools and engines grounding him once more. But the next morning changed everything. The call came just after sunrise, as Armin was preparing to open the garage. The number was unfamiliar, and for a moment, he considered ignoring it. Calls usually meant problems, unpaid bills, unexpected expenses, reminders of everything he was trying to keep at bay. Still, he answered. The voice on the other end was composed, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of urgency that immediately caught his attention. It was a woman. Her tone carried authority, the kind that came from a life very different from his own. She didn't introduce herself right away, but when she did, the name sent a ripple of disbelief through him. She was Syra Malik, a name that carried weight in the city, a business magnate, a billionaire, a woman whose empire stretched far beyond what Armin could even imagine. And then, as if the world had decided to twist the knife just a little deeper, he recognized something else. She was the same woman from the black SUV, the one who had looked at him like he was invisible. For a moment, Armin said nothing. Her voice softened, just slightly, as she explained. The girl from yesterday, her daughter, Ariba, had told her everything. About the flat tire, about the strangers who drove past without stopping, about the mechanic who had helped without asking for anything in return. There was a pause on the line, heavy with unspoken things. Syra admitted something then, something that seemed to cost her more than she expected. She had misjudged him. Not just him, but people like him. She had seen his garage, his appearance, and made assumptions she hadn't even questioned. Armin listened quietly, unsure of what to say. Then she made an offer. It wasn't charity. That much she made clear. It was an opportunity. Her company owned a fleet of vehicles that required regular maintenance, and she wanted to contract his garage for the job. It would mean steady income, stability, things Armin hadn't known in years. He almost laughed. Life didn't work like that. Not for people like him. Good things didn't just appear out of nowhere. There was always a catch, always a reason to doubt. But something in her voice felt genuine. He thought of Zoya, of her dreams, her quiet resilience, the way she deserved more than the life he was barely managing to give her. And so, after a long moment, he said yes. The days that followed felt surreal. The garage that once struggled to survive slowly began to transform. New tools replaced old ones. Work came in steadily, no longer unpredictable. Armin hired help. Two young men who reminded him of himself at their age, full of potential but lacking opportunity. But more than financial stability, it was something else that changed him. Respect. People who once ignored him now greeted him with nods of acknowledgement. Customers who would have driven past now stopped, curious about the small garage that had somehow earned the trust of one of the city's most powerful figures. And yet, Armin remained the same. He still worked with his own hands, still treated every customer with the same quiet kindness, still believed that dignity wasn't something given. It was something you carried within you, no matter how the world tried to take it away. A week later, a familiar car pulled up outside his garage. This time, Armin looked up. Syra stepped out, her presence commanding as ever, but there was something different in her expression. Less distance, less judgment. Beside her, Ariba smiled softly, her eyes meeting his with genuine warmth. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Some connections weren't built through words, but through actions, through moments that revealed who we truly were when no one was watching. Armin watched as they left, the car disappearing down the same road, where everything had begun. The sun was just as harsh, the city just as unforgiving, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to build. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share and comment, because stories like these remind us that kindness can still change lives in the most unexpected ways. And before this story ends, here's a special request. Tell us in the comments, have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? That evening, as Armin closed his garage, Zoya ran toward him, her laughter filling the air like a promise of better days. He lifted her effortlessly, holding her close as the sky turned shades of gold and orange. In that moment, he realized something simple yet profound. The world might judge you by what you appear to be. It might laugh, dismiss, and underestimate you. But it only takes one moment, one act of kindness, to remind everyone, including yourself, of who you truly are.